Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last session of day 2 of the Culturally Competent Conversations for Equity and Belongingness Summit, or the C3EB Summit. And this particular session is so dear to me because of the expert presenter who's going to be talking today, my dear friend Santosh Mathew. Before I get into, hey Santosh, before I get into you and hand the stage over to you, just a couple housekeeping things, that I got to take care of. If you're joining in on YouTube or Facebook, make sure you comment. Whether you're watching this live or watching this later, comment, because we are going to be monitoring the comments, and I'm going to make sure, I guarantee you, I'm going to make sure that your comments, especially if there are questions, will get directly to Santosh so that he can respond to your questions directly. So whatever questions or doubts you have, make sure you put them in the comments and I will get them to Santosh even if they are not live. Second and last piece of thing before housekeeping, before I introduce Santosh and give him the stage, is this would not be possible if not for our partners and sponsors who believed in this little dream and who decided to walk the walk with us toward equity, toward belongingness, and toward intentional inclusion. And actually, Santosh is a huge part of making this sponsorship happen. So thank you to Santosh, but thank you to our partners and sponsors. Essential IT, our web team, Defy the Status Quo Marketing, our content specialists, Zanzibar Enterprises, and because of Santosh, the Nielsen Company. And this is why I say because of Santosh. I want to tell you guys a little bit about him. Santosh has spent, I'm losing my voice because I've been talking all day. Santosh has spent the last 16 years in multiple industries ranging from government, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, and numerous technical capacities. Currently at Nielsen, as a director of technology, he leads the global mergers and acquisitions integration practice to rapidly integrate new companies into their HR, billing, finance, and payroll systems. And when I say they, I mean Nielsen, our sponsors, or partners rather. For 6 years and counting, he has co-led Nielsen's Asian Affinity Linked Employee Resource Group, driving cultural exploration and inclusive practices, and leads the North American Green Team to ideate ways to make the company more sustainable. He's a graduate of Nielsen's Diverse Leadership Program, Connect Florida Leadership Program, the University of Oklahoma with a Master's in Information Sciences, and the Oklahoma Christian University with an MBA. Santosh serves multiple nonprofit organizations. He is the National Director for Employee Resource Groups for NAAAP, National. In this role, he is able to curate content that helps companies understand how best to create, extend ERG and BRG activities in their companies. An executive board member of the Sustany Foundation, he represents Nielsen for the Tampa Bay Partnerships Regional Talent Working Group, focused on critical elements for retaining talent and workforce for the entire region. Santosh and his wife have 4 wonderful children who are absolutely beautiful and adorable, the latest who arrived in 2019, and they live in Tampa after transplanting from Oklahoma. There's a lot more I can say about Santosh, but really I'm going to save it for our Q&A for later, because for me, this is an opportunity to really dig into somebody I consider a dear personal friend and an unofficial mentor and sponsor in so many ways, and I'm just so blessed to know him. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Santosh Mathew to the C3EB Summit platform. Santosh, please take it away.
Thank you, Dr. AJ. Hi, everyone. So I think I told Dr. AJ last time that she read that bio that I needed to shorten that bio. And I probably need to stop saying yes to so many things because that bio is way too long. Today I'm going to share a presentation just for you to follow along. And my talk today is leveraging the power of ERGs, BRGs to maximize equity and inclusion. Now, today I really just want to kind of tell you a couple of stories, share a couple of facts and different things, and then I want to just hopefully lead your organization, or if you are a practitioner in the BRG space, if you're a DNI professional in a large corporation, I'm hoping that what you'll have is a few nuggets to really just kind of chew on after this presentation. And just so you're aware of what the ERGs and BRGs are, employee resource groups. I'm not going to read this particular set of, just very normal definitions, but, they represent employees with different characteristics. They can be religious, ethnic, gender, lifestyle, whatever it may be. They exist to provide us an avenue, right, for career development, personal development, and also a safe space for our employees to kind of grow and be their authentic selves. So, a little bit about my story. If you saw the preview for the C3EB conference with myself and Dr. AJ, I mentioned a little bit about how a lot of where I'm at today, even talking to you at this conference, is really because of a photograph. And so I'm going to talk about that story here in a moment. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about the growth opportunity that happened at the organization, and then also kind of how this whole thing became admirer to sponsor to opportunity creator. So back in the day, when I was just joining the Nielsen company, I had come from a mid-sized organization. It was a small to large, mid-sized manufacturing company, about 200 to $500 million, depending on which division you were part of. And moving into a large organization like Nielsen was fairly intimidating. When you walk in to the offices and there are thousands upon thousands of people, and your particular job is one specific thing in a large engagement, then how do you figure out what else is happening? And I was introduced to the concept of an employee resource group whenever I originally got at Nielsen, and it was probably about 3 to 4 weeks in. There was no real employee orientation that was happening back then. It was very short. But then I got an email from the employee resource group saying, hey, we have an open house and why don't you come out? And so I was like, well, I want to go meet new people. Signed up for one of the ERGs, and I was attending an event by one of our executives, and somebody walks up and says, hey, we need somebody to take photographs. So I was like, oh, well, I've got my camera here. I can take a photograph. And what happened after that was somebody was like, well, hey, we appreciate you helping us with the photograph. Do you mind helping us with the next event? I was like, well, sure, I can help. And then a couple weeks later, that same person comes up to me and they're like, hey, how about helping lead our organization? And the rest is kind of history. And it's so funny that something as simple as volunteering and taking a photograph was something that led me on a path to where I sit in front of you today as a practitioner. Now, the reason that I'm able to sit here and kind of share some of these best practices and some of these experiences are not because I have some sort of special innate ability to become an expert in everything, but it is because my organization was willing to create these affinity groups and really be able to invest in their employees. So the second part of this story is that as I was in my organization, now listen, I was working really hard to make sure that I did what I could to do well at my job and then hopefully be noticed. And I was noticed by a group of individuals. And I got an email and it said, "You have been selected to a diverse leader network." And at the time, I was like, does anybody know what this is? And most people didn't know what it was because it was a brand new program that the organization had taken and said, we are going to find high performing individuals and we are going to now educate them and we're going to create sponsorship opportunities for them so that we can build our pipeline of young leaders. And so from that moment, I moved on and I was able to take part in a diversity training program, which was not really about diversity training, but it was about creating senior leaders. It was creating a pipeline of individuals that were going to be able to fill in the gap whenever the organization as a whole needed it. And so my final point on my little story here is how an admirer came to become my sponsor and an opportunity creator. So again, going back to these affinity groups and these various different groups that we were involved with, one of the groups that I was involved with had created a sustainable program to take a lot of the older equipment that we had and provide that to a recycler, an e-cycler, who's going to refurbish those laptops or desktops or whatever they may be. And then we as an organization were able to help donate those things to needy organizations or low-income individuals or schools or various different things. And this effort caught the eye of one of the senior managers who would then become the CIO of Nielsen. And later on, she would become one of my sponsors. And she would come to me and say, Santosh, I have a problem and I need to solve it. And I was like, well, I'd be more than happy to take a swing at it and do something for you. She described one of the positions that I'm in today, which was this merger and acquisition position. And I mentioned to her that, while I had had little bits and experiences here and there in my past, I was not a person that had this in their resume. But what she said was really important. She said, it is because we are investing in you that we're able to trust you with these opportunities to stretch and to grow, right? Because within an organization, a lot of times we're not able to see the individual outside of their day job. But because we have leveraged the power of ERGs and BRGs, we're able to get individuals out and potentially see other things that they don't normally provide. So I want to take a few moments to talk a little bit about the leverage, right? Organizations that are looking to create diverse talent, right? They're looking for diverse talent to join their organization. One of the easiest ways that they can do it is by leveraging their ERG groups, right? ERGs are built on a couple of basic foundations, one of which can sometimes be professional development, sometimes it is networking, sometimes it's a community arm, it could be various different things. But however your ERG is structured, one of the things that you can do is you can take that affinity group and say, let's go out and let's either reach into our networks and find other talent that might be able to fill these openings, or let's create events where we can attract people to come in. So when done properly, they can also provide individuals or departments and groups of people to interact with, and those that would not normally cross paths. I was in a very software engineering role whenever I first got to Nielsen. And when I moved on to some of these other roles, they were nowhere close. And there were no other people coming with me in a lot of cases, because even though ERGs are available, ERGs are not always leveraged. And while people have the opportunity to join them, usually freely with only a time commitment, a lot of people don't take advantage of them. And so another thing is that depending on the maturity of your ERG, or when you leverage them even further, you're able to create a self-replicating pipeline of talent. And what I mean by this is that you're able to start to not just work with the talent that you have, but you're able to give them skills, and you're able to give them experiences that can enhance the skills that they may already have. And what a lot of people have is that we have a lot of specialists in our organizations that are very one-dimensional. They do their job really, really well, but to do some of the softer things that an ERG does, or do some of the project-oriented things, that putting on an event or putting on a session or doing different things, exposes people to another muscle, right, that actually helps them out. It could be a public speaking muscle, it could be a project management muscle, it could just be a leading an organization muscle, it could be running the finances of the organization muscle. I mean, there's a lot of different components to running these ERGs. And a couple other things, right? Talent may not have started out with the skills, right? I just mentioned that, but they can be taught via these interactions. And I love this other part where a lot of times what we find is we find these advocates, right? We find these people that end up being our sounding boards when we're going through a crisis, or when the business needs to shift quickly to meet a demographic need or meet some sort of a socio-economic need. You can now leverage these people that you watch them work, and you watch them present, and you watch them kind of give you some of themselves, and you can now use these people as an internal feedback mechanism. And in a lot of cases, that is, it's a trust that's been built, right? Because you have given them the organization so that they can get together, so that they can leverage one another, and just that investment allows you to build a trust level that is not common, right? You're not always able to just go to your employees and poll them and say, hey, what do you think about such and such issue, or how do you want the company to do? Most companies don't do that, right? If they don't have this built-in trust chain with their diversity groups or with their affinity group, you're usually consulting someone that's going to give you something that's very specific and very polished and very safe, and it may not reflect what the lower parts of the organization are really feeling. I wanted to also talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls. So we can leverage, obviously, by creating these groups or empowering these groups, but there's also some potential drawbacks that we should be watching out for. So one of the drawbacks could be that the group becomes identified as the main or singular authority on a subject, and this is sometimes a positive thing, because the ERG or DNI group becomes really powerful within the organization. But this also can cause blind spots, right? Because if, as an organization, if you have this now silo of diversity or engagement or whatever it may be, and if it's not strongly attached to the business or the operations or the senior leadership, then if you're not part of this pipeline, or if you're not part of this silo, then you can have these blind spots that you're not representing a good part of the organization. And this happens, right? This happens from time to time because you see lots of turnover in these different areas, because the ERG director or the DNI specialist or leader doesn't have the backing of an organization. And then when push comes to shove, they are shoved. And it is super, super important for an organization to do more than that, right? We don't want our DNI groups or our affinity groups to be the scapegoat for leadership or the board or stakeholders or whatever it may be, because there was an issue that came and we turned to this powerful kind of authoritative body and they gave you an opinion. That opinion may not have been aligned with unknown things to them, right? I mean, there's lots of different factors that go into a business, and that's why it's super important not to just have these organizations, but that they have to be tied to the hip, right? To your C-suite and your board and all these different things, because without that leadership, right? Without that top level leadership, these organizations are as strong as, paper houses. So again, lack of sponsorship, leadership, sometimes a group within the network has a weak sponsor. These are causes for us to sometimes worry, right? If you don't have a strong leader in some of these groups or at the top of these groups, this can hurt the efficacy of the group, right? This can hurt the way that people perceive it internally, right? This is an internal customer battle that you have to constantly churn. You have to constantly win this internal battle that employee engagement is important, and not that it's important, but that it is meaningful. And that's one battle that a lot of ERGs struggle with. Being inequitable, right? So it isn't always easy to fund an ERG or a BRG because doing things are not cheap. And so now you're talking about something that is not always the bottom line, right? It is not always something that our external customers can feel or see or touch, right? We are believing that by engaging our employees, by listening to them, by understanding them, by getting their input, we are able to produce a better product, produce a better service, be a better company, and ultimately be better for our customers. And that's hard to sometimes have people buy into and quantify. Now, I'll show you a stat here in a little bit. A lot of large companies have ERGs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing everything that they need. And another thing is that even in ERG land, right, we have different levels. If you're a more established ERG or you have a larger concentration and you're versus a smaller ERG that is newer or a less, popular group per se, or whatever it may be. Sometimes that funding, just like a normal business, may not be the most equitable. And this is always one of those things, those challenges that we have to constantly find ways to support each of these affinity groups and organizations. Even if it's not equally monetarily, we can do a lot of things from a senior leadership level, and not just senior leaders, right? Let's not forget our mid-managers. Mid-managers, over the last 4 or 5 years, one of the number one things that employee resource groups have surveyed in my company is that middle managers don't get it. Middle managers don't always allow their employees to interact or do things during their workday. Middle managers are one of the bigger bottlenecks, kind of like silent elephants in the room that can kind of cause a little bit of unintended friction. And like anything, if you're in a different part of the journey with employee resource groups or affinity groups or whatever it may be, even your D&I practice in some cases, you're going to have critics, right? When something is new or not fully tested or doesn't have an ROI attached to it, it is one of those things that you have to constantly churn, and you have to constantly build the business case. And the one business case every year is not the one, right? You have to always be kind of showing the value of an engaged employee versus an unengaged employee. And I think one of the other big things here that, is really important to think about is that ERG, BRG leaders, a lot of times we do this as volunteer efforts, right? This is above and beyond. This is above and beyond our day job. I do due diligence for mergers and acquisitions, and I help integrate companies into a back-end software stack that is very complex. And then on top of that, I help lead functional teams and lots of other things. And this is not something that is in my job description, right? And so one of the big pitfalls of a lot of these ERG groups is that we hang on to ERG leaders for so long, and a lot of times we burn them out. The reason I was presented a opportunity when I was presented was because the previous person before me was burned out. She was being worked too much with her day job, and trying to balance it with the demands of leading the ERG were just too much for her. And she eventually did come back, but it took a while, right? It took a while for her to have to be able to push a lot of those other things aside, and almost a change of management for her to be able to free it up. And so those are the things that we have to be thinking about. We are not always compensating, and compensation may be a thing that we need to think about doing. Now, you may get an award here or there. You may have some sort of something to help these leaders, but especially now when you're talking about lots of these social issues that are driving a lot of our affinity groups, they're looking to us in ERG land, right, to be able to share our opinions and get on calls and do town halls and do different things. I can tell you in the last 2 or 3 months, I've been on probably 20 to 30 different meetings about various different topics, right? And none of those meetings are my day job, right? And we're talking about good chunks and investments of time. But one of those things is it's a value to us because we are in the conversation. But a lot of times, the people that we are in the conversation with, it is their job to be in that conversation, and we are just there for additional support kind of at our own time. So again, I think one of the big things that I will hope that we start to see more and more is that ERGs and BRGs are not just treated as volunteer groups, but their value that they have brought to the table can actually be also handed back, right? Can be shared back, and that value can be shared along the way, because organizations are really getting rich engagement, and you can't put a price, and you might be able to actually put a price on a lot of it, but I don't have any of those prices here. A couple numbers that I just wanted to share. I'm just going to throw all these up on the screen so that you can kind of see, and I apologize, I moved a little too fast, but McKinsey study, right, found that organizations with diverse boards and executive teams were up to 35% more likely to outperform. I mean, this is something that's well known, but it's pretty amazing that a very recent study is constantly saying the exact same thing. We know that having diversity within your leadership and your organization and within your employees it's a good thing. 90% of Fortune 500 companies, this is a mind-boggling number, but 90% have ERGs, right? But 8.5% of those employees in the US, and after the US, it's only 4.3%. So you're talking about a significant portion of working people have access to ERGs and choose not to be in them. And again, I think this gets back to how are we engaging not just in ERGs, but how do those ERGs, how are they able to engage the people that are around them? And then a couple of last stats, right, that I wanted to share. Chief diversity officers are not a magic button, right? You hiring a chief diversity officer doesn't guarantee that everything starts to engage better or all your issues go away. That's just not how it is. Now, I will shout out my CEO of the Nielsen company, David Kinney. And David came on a little over a year ago, and he believes in this so much that he basically said, I am not just CEO, I'm going to be CDO. Now, most people are like me. When I first heard that, I'm like, sure, this is just kind of a play. But I got to tell you, that is a CEO that lives it, and he lives it really, really hard. He has really been a driver in the organization. And as our organization has gone through a lot of changes, he has kept pushing D&I and ERGs to the forefront to say, we can't get to where we need to go without you. And it is really, really impressive to have your senior leader not just say it, not just do a couple things. He's living it, and then he shares it with a ton of other people. He's proud of it. And you've got to get that type of engagement, right, to actually get a lot of things moving. And this one, I think I alluded to earlier, we don't spend enough in a lot of cases. You're talking about the average annual budget for an ERG is $7,200 for 100 members. My best year, I think, was about $6,000 or $7,000, and I had 200 members and was doing events with hundreds and hundreds of people. And I'm not saying that you don't have other avenues, right? We found ways to either raise money or go and build a business case, and your organization should have different mechanisms like that. So if you're in an ERG right now and you're like, oh, hey, I'm with you, I don't have enough money, it shouldn't be an excuse, right? We have been given an opportunity to lead. And one of the things that you've got to lead through is skim times, right? And you've got to find a way to create opportunity for yourself so that you can do more things. A couple of last things, and then I just want to wrap it up with one more story. If you're in an ERG, my theme this year as the National Director for Employee Resource Groups for the National Association of Asian American Professionals, which is a nonprofit group, is ERGs and me. And this tongue-in-cheek kind of thought is, it sounds selfish, but it's not, and then it is, right? You, as a leader in your organization or as an ERG member, you need to recognize that your organization, if they have come to the wherewithal that they need D&I and they need ERGs, then most of them have figured out by now that you need good sponsorship at the senior level. Now, it may not be chief CEO, it may not be high enough, but there's usually good senior leadership in the organizations, and it's usually somewhat tied to your human resource organizations, right? So there's movement there, right? So as an individual, and as you're selling ERGs to individuals that haven't signed up or aren't part, it should be understood that you have that senior leadership, right? And when you are sufficiently sponsored, being part of an ERG, BRG can get you exposure to individuals that you're not normally going to be given access to. The lady that ended up becoming my sponsor, one of my great mentors, Kim Anstead, was not in my purview. I would never cross paths with her because I was in a completely different organization. But because I leveraged the power of being in an ERG first by taking a photograph, and then I leveraged the power of saying yes to being a leader of an organization that I didn't really know what to do, and because I leveraged the opportunities that just kind of kept coming, I crossed paths. And by crossing paths, I was able to build another step or two into my career. And exposure doesn't have to always be CIO. It doesn't always have to be CEO, right? A lot of people in many companies that I've dealt with, many companies and organizations, their ERGs, what they've been able to do is they've been able to share themselves and create these pipelines of internal referrals of people that you trust. These are people that we know that, hey, not only are they taking care of business, they're taking care of their day job, but they are so passionate about either relationships or different affinities or different causes. They're so passionate that they are going to take a little bit of additional time, and in some cases, a lot of additional time to see those things through, to see impacts in those areas. And when you find that, you're able to do amazing things because you have this built-in group of people that you're able to leverage. And again, there's opportunities to learn. There's opportunities to create project management skills. There's all these different volunteer options, and the laptop program that we were able to take things that we were going to junk basically or get shredded or get disposed of. We were able to give it second life and give someone else second life. That program did not exist. It was a thought that myself and another friend had, and we went and we traversed the chain of a large organization to ask for permission. And just that alone was a learning process. And then you're able to see the impact that you're able to do to your community and give as opportunities to the people in your group, and you are fulfilled. And these are amazing things. One final thing, running an ERG in some of these organizations could be like running a small startup. And in some cases, in larger organizations, or especially in these larger affinity groups, and a lot of these business resource groups where you're really tied to a business function, you're tied to a business objective, and they're looking for your affinity group to drive actual dollars. In a lot of these cases, it's like running a small division of a company. I mean, you can't ask for better than this type of kind of in corporation training or in your company training, because a lot of times this is left for a select few groups of people that are division heads or they are larger groups of managers. And now we've created that opportunity for more and more people. And whether you leverage it in this place or in the next place, you have been given that opportunity. So I'll bring this to a close with a final story. My organization is going through lots of changes, like I think a lot of organizations are. Whether it's coronavirus or it is business decisions or whatever it may be, an ERG and a BRG is an opportunity to not just leverage the people that were part of that, but to continue to share the engagement opportunities for people that are now completely remote. Another big thing is that this is still an opportunity for us to create pipelines of opportunities, because now I don't have the water cooler anymore. I need to find a way to interact with people that I am literally blind to, because once they get past the camera, I don't see them anymore. I can't go see them right now. But employee resource groups create opportunities for us to engage. And you can even break that down to where you have virtual coffees or virtual happy hours or professional development events or lots of different things. And you get to interact with people in a very just easy way. And as change happens, right, you have a built-in family, you have a built-in support system. Listen, I have lost lots of friends that have moved to different companies, or, because of things before the coronavirus, right, decisions or businesses being sold off or whatever it may be, organizations have made changes, and people that have left were really close to me. But I have these relationships now that now permeate well outside of my organization. And it is a blessing, right? I will always be able to look back at my organization and their investment in me to be able to say that I am here because not just taking a photograph, but because the organization created an opportunity and a pipeline for me to be able to become this best self. The final story. Last year, I ran my first marathon. I was going to try to run another one this year, but obviously things happen. And as I was working on just, my goal was finish the race. You got to finish the race. It was the longest I'd ever run. Now, I practiced. I had been training to some extent, but I had never gone in the supposed big runs that you needed to get because, quite frankly, I have 4 children. There's no time. I commute, right? All those different things. But I got my runs in. I got a lot of runs in, but I never ran more than like 6 or 10 miles, ever. And here I am, 26.2 miles, and I'm up to one of these final signs. And it says 200 meters. 200 meters to the finish line. And as I slowed down for a moment and I pulled out my phone, I took a picture of this sign and I look at it and I'm like, wow, I'm almost there. I did it somehow. Nothing's going to stop me right now. I am going to cross this line. And as I was thinking and as I was starting to shift my muscles back in and trying to get moving again, I started thinking, what do I do next? What's going to happen now? This race is over. Where am I going to go next? What am I going to do next? And a lot of times, one of the things that we fail to recognize is that it's not necessarily about just this one particular finish line, right? And we don't have to always be worried about every single other thing that's along the way, but by getting to the finish line, it doesn't mean our race is over. It just validates that we are able to do that thing now. And now you start to build on what's next. Just because I was able to finish that marathon doesn't mean I'm a world-class marathon runner. It means that, hey, you have the capability to push through enough pain to finish that race, but you could have done it a little bit faster, and you're going to do it a little bit faster the next time. And one of the things I would leave you with today is no matter where you are in your ERG journey or your BRG journey or your D&I journey, leveraging these things is not a one-time effort. It's not a let's set them up and they're done. I led an ERG and I'm done. Whatever you want, insert it and I'm done. No, it is, yes, I may have crossed this finish line. Yes, I may have progressed my organization or my affinity group or whatever it may be to this point and I'm now handing it off. But now it's time for me to take my next journey. And I would say for all our organizations, employee resource groups, affinity groups, and BRGs, and all these different things, where we have come to is one point in our journey. We may have crossed a couple of finish lines. Your organization may be at one place versus the other, but right now, what's most important is recognizing that you're able to cross that finish line, and now you're able to go on to the next journey along the way. Hopefully, I'll share this last quote. I really liked it. There are no words to express the abyss between isolation and having one ally. It may be conceded to the mathematician that 4 is twice 2, but 2 is not twice 1. 2 is 2,000 times 1. And it's kind of a good way to say that there's so much value to these things, and leveraging them can be taken in so many different avenues. And I hope that I've given you a couple of good nuggets. And as I think Dr. AJ had mentioned, if there's something that I can help share with you in the future, please feel free to reach out to me, or if you have questions, I look forward to answering them. And let me see. Apparently, I have a little bit of animation there. I'm going to kill this presentation. There you go.
Awesome. That was awesome. That was awesome. And honestly, for anybody watching this live or watching this later, please follow Santosh Mathew on LinkedIn. You can find him Santosh Mathew. He's like the only one. I promise you, because I found him that way. Outside of NAAAP, but he does these weekly videos, which are so on point, and he's so candid. But what I love about you, Santosh, other than the fact that, you know, we have this amazing relationship and bond that we've built together out of mutual respect and growth and collaboration and all of that, is you claim to be a visionary thinker on LinkedIn. And when I first came across you through NAAAP, like way back in the day, I was like, uh-huh. And then I started, come on, I you know me, I'm one of the most jaded people and cynical people, because I will test every limit of you before I decide to associate with you. That's just my paranoia there. But it's not that I'm not giving people chances. I will give people chances, but I will also see where those chances take us. And like, you were always so authentic and transparent. And when you say you're a visionary thinker, you really, really are. You really actually walk that walk, and you don't, for being, you know, a preacher's son, you don't preach what you don't practice.
I try not to.
Yeah. And that's a rarity. So that's something I really, really appreciate about you, and just your candidness with everything. Today's session, as usual, like our conversations, which I'm going to debrief with you about on the phone after this. Like, I'm going to give you like my actual unfiltered feedback, because you know how those are going to go. But this was amazing, because I don't think many people realize how, like, you know, I think most people sign up for these ERGs and BRGs. No, they're not going to get compensated. No, it's going to be extra work. No, it's like volunteer. And they sort of go into it with their eye rolls and, oh, I got to do this and da-da-da. But, and I'm speaking from experience and also from, you know, so many other stories about, I don't think people still realize, yo, you can use this to your advantage. You can leverage the crap out of this. You can maximize this to catapult you into where you want to be. And really, for me, the greatest part of your entire story through all of it is you show up. Like, that's the consistent part of all of your mini stories. You show up.
I, for some reason, keep saying yes.
Right? Like, you show up and you're present. That actually is just like the bottom line. There's like no secret to that. You say yes and you're like, great, I'll do it. And you actually show up to do it. Because there are a lot of people that say yes, but don't show up.
Sure.
You know?
And you need to learn your balance too, right? Because I think there for a long time, I did say yes to a lot of things. And then I finally had to learn to say no. Because I wanted to make sure that the level that I was giving people was as consistent as possible. And, you know, you've got to factor in your things. Right now, everybody's stuck at home. And, you know, I was literally running around right before this, taking care of children. And then I throw something on, right, because I look polished. But in reality, if I had been going to a conference, right, you now have to factor in travel, and you're at a hotel, and you're doing all this and that. And now you've taken a ton of time away from family, and you've got to factor in all those things. And I've had to do those things. But again, there's a value for yourself that you need to continue to get, and then there's a value that you can give others.
Yeah. I want to make this very salient about exactly what you said, the value that you get and the value that you give. I want this on record going into this recording. Santosh went and changed his blazer so that it matched my necklace. Like, that was literally what happened 30 seconds before we went online. Because I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, you would match my necklace. Please go change. And that it is a degree of yes, ma'am, whatever, but it's also a degree of, it actually doesn't take that much out of me. Just do that extra step for you. I can still hold my boundary, and within that boundary, I can make you happy. And by making you happy, I exhibit the best kind of leadership.
And hopefully I'll get good feedback from you in a little bit.
Dude, that pink blazer is awesome. It really brings out your skin tone. All right. Let me just start off with that. But yes, you are going to get great feedback. But all of this said, you know, you and I are going to work together. We're going to continue this conversation. So I'm not worried about that. Thank you for everybody who joined in today, in spite of all of the technical difficulties and delays and lags. And Santosh, today was, wait till I debrief you on today. But thank you for sticking it with us. And tomorrow is the final day of the inaugural C3EB Summit, where we focus on health, wellness, and arts and society. And we have some amazing speakers lined up. I know Santosh is going to be watching a few of those because I'm going to make him, but that's besides the point. We will see you all tomorrow. I am tired. I'm sure you all are tired. My tech team is tired. So let's call it a night. And good night. We will see you bright and early tomorrow. I actually have a keynote first thing in the morning tomorrow at 9:15 on dreaming, scheming, and doing, how to reclaim the word scheme.
Ooh.
It's supposed to be about a greater call to action, but really, no. All I'm going to be doing is reclaiming the word schemer because it has such a negative connotation. I don't agree with it. But we'll talk more about that tomorrow. For tonight, have a wonderful night, and we will see you tomorrow for the final day of the C3EB Summit. And as you go to bed tonight, just happy thoughts, good vibes, no tech difficulties tomorrow. That's what we're going for. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks, Santosh. I'm going to call you in 30 seconds.